Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've prepared another quick list video for all of you. We're going to be looking at 5 great comic books for fantasy readers. In case you haven't guessed it, yes, this whole video is going to be kind of genre-based, and these are all comics that veer into, if are not full-fledged, into the fantasy genre of fiction. Now, before we get started on today's list, I did just want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, perhaps even a few of the books featured in this video, I'd first like to encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you very much for considering. Now let's go ahead and get started. Okay, kicking off this list in no particular order, we have one of my current nightly readers. This is Conan the Barbarian, the original comics omnibus, Volume 1, published by Titan Comics. This oversized hardcover edition is a beauty, and yes, Marvel did reprint these omnibuses not too long ago, but after their licensing ran out, Titan went ahead and picked it up, and now they are reprinting this run. Now these are the original early 70s comics, so we have them written by Roy Thomas with art primarily from Barry Windsor Smith. Now this is my first time delving into the world of Conan the Barbarian, and I am delighted so far with what I've found here. Now this, unlike Savage Sword of Conan, which mostly collected the Savage Sword magazine that didn't have to ascribe to the comics code, this series collects the less explicit and more straight-laced Conan titles, so we don't have really a ton of graphic imagery or nudity, things like that for the most part with this run. This is just some high fantasy sword and sorcery kind of adventure. We have Conan, our titular barbarian character, who's making his way across this fantastical scape, which is set to take place after the fall of Atlantis and long before the advent of modern civilization as we know it. We have him fighting all sorts of people and monsters and sorcerers and things, and it is just a ton of fun. I think with Marvel initially printing all of these omnibuses over the last couple years, this was a title I was always kind of curious about, but I never delved into myself. I was elated when I heard Titan picked up the licenses and was cranking out these omnibuses beginning at the Volume 1 here, and I was even more delighted when they sent me this copy. For those interested on my full thoughts on this book and just additional coverage on it, I do plan to do a complete review of this book once I complete it. As I said, this is my current nightly reader, so I don't know how much more I can speak on it without spoiling too much, and again, bear in mind, I'm only a few issues in, maybe 7, 8 issues so far, but yeah, so far an absolute thrill ride, a gem in this genre, and as someone who's recently read through Roy Thomas's run on Avengers, it's fun to see where he kind of goes from there and what he does in this new sandbox. If you like fantasy, definitely I recommend Conan the Barbarian. Okay, and now going up to a more contemporary title, this is Dark Knights of Steel Volume 1 by Tom Taylor and Yasmin Putri from DC Comics. Now this is kind of in a different universe or parallel world within the DC universe, wherein we have all of these DC Comics superhero characters in a medieval kind of time and place, as opposed to a more modern conventional setting. This is the first volume of a 2-volume set. I do believe they're coming out with a deluxe edition or something in 2025 if I'm not mistaken, and I think they started on a sequel series or spin-off of sorts. Anyway, this is the Volume 1. It introduces us to the world of Dark Knights of Steel and the primary cast of characters. We have notable faces like Batman, Superman, and more, but I won't really spoil too much for the sake of this video, but if you'd like more details about this volume, you can seek out my full review of the book. I really liked this, and I like seeing Tom Taylor play in these big sandboxes where he can kind of do whatever he wants. I saw him do similar things with stuff like Injustice for DC, or Dark Ages over at Marvel, or more recently Deceased, his kind of zombie take on the DC universe. Tom Taylor is so talented, but when he gets kind of a huge sandbox like this and he can do what he wants with these characters, we get some really creative and fun storytelling. storytelling. You pair that with Putri's gorgeous artwork throughout, and you have a real cinematic kind of spectacle here. I also just think it's so fun to set the DC Comics characters in a world of kind of high fantasy settings, characters, magic systems in many ways. A lot of great twists and turns. You do see recognizable characters, but at times remixed or refreshed in new and exciting ways. I am curious to see what happens in the Volume 2, which kind of culminates this initial maxi series. I still need to pick up a copy. Unfortunately, I only have this one, which I bought at a used comic book store, but I, like I said, was absolutely enchanted by it, and for the fantasy genre, this is a modern pick that I think is very accessible to a lot of readers, and again, the art is just gorgeous. If you've enjoyed Tom Taylor's work, like I said, with things like Injustice, or even if you follow some of his ongoing superhero runs, like Nightwing, or when he did All New Wolverine over at Marvel, that style lent to this genre is just really brilliant. I definitely recommend Dark Knights of Steel. And hey, while I have you, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing comic book lists, reviews, unboxings, shorts, and more. Thank you so much for considering. Now on with the show. Next up today on my fantasy comic recommendation list, The Mighty Thor by Walter Simonson Omnibus. I do have the direct market cover of the most recent reprint, which at the time of the recording I believe might still be in print. Definitely try to check it out before it sells out again. But this is kind of the preeminent and one of the most well-regarded Thor runs of all time. I believe it came out around the 80s, give or take, but this is a classic fantasy-based Thor run. Yes, we do have him doing some super heroic kind of exploits, but for the most part, this feels like a fantasy story first. We get to explore different realms, kind of mythological, fantastical characters, cultures, all the things, and honestly, it's a ton of fun. Notably, this omnibus does have a more modernized recoloring compared to the actual individual single issues when they came out. I know some people don't like when older comics are recolored. I can certainly understand that argument. However, in this case, I do think it elevates this material in a way as a modern reader I find absolutely gorgeous. I think some of the modern flourishes make this book feel timeless in a weird way. I think Simonson absolutely understands this character, and I like the blend of high fantasy, superheroics, and honestly, kind of humor. Simonson has a lot of great jokes here, and I am in for the ride. Admittedly, I am still making my way through this book as well, but with what I've read thus far, I think that this is a fantasy-based comic classic. I can't wait to review this on the channel as well. Let me know in the comments if you're a fan of Simonson's Thor. Thor, honestly, for me, is a more recent superhero comic read. I avoided this character for a while, and I've just recently started to dabble with him. I read the entire Matt Fraction run not too long ago, going through Jason Aaron's. I've been hearing nothing but nonstop good reviews for JMS's run as well. Don't have that volume, but I've definitely been dabbling with this character a bit more. Simonson is one that I have heard about for years and years. I used to have some of this run in trade paperback, sold it off years ago, and I always wanted to come back and read this run all the way through. I've read the first handful of issues in this run a couple times, I believe, but now I have the omnibus. I have it all in one, and what a great place to jump in on a fantasy-based Marvel superhero. If you're intrigued by this and you'd like to see this reviewed on the channel, definitely let me know in the comments. But for everyone else, if you're looking for something to read, maybe check out Thor by Walter Simonson. Next on this list comes by way of Image Comics. This is Birthright Volume 1 by Joshua Williamson. Now, this is a non-Big 2 comic book series. It is self-contained and was completed. I think that there were 10 trade paperback volumes, if I'm not mistaken. And rather recently, they did release the first oversized hardcover deluxe edition for Birthright that concludes the first half of this series. I believe it's going to be a 2-volume set eventually, hopefully. But obviously, you can collect it in floppy or digital as well. But this series has a kind of modern cast of characters. We have a family unit, husband, wife, and their 2 young sons. The youngest son goes off to play catch by the woods with his dad, goes to retrieve the ball, and disappears. We then catch up with this family that's now a bit fractured and broken a year or so later, and all of a sudden this grizzled, kind of sword-bearing mountain of a man shows up claiming to be the young boy who disappeared just that year before. We hear a story where this boy was transported into this fantastical world or realm where he had to become a chosen one-like figure. Time moves differently in that other world, which is why he returned so much older only after a year. And honestly, this is a really fun premise that has even more of a wrinkle, and I won't spoil why, but there's a lot that goes into this world and even the basic synopsis that make it a lot more fascinating and nuanced. A definite character-driven series that I have had fun reading thus far. I did read and review this very first volume here on the channel, I think a year or so ago if I'm not mistaken, but this was a really fun read. I liked the juxtaposition between kind of a modern, kind of current setting and a total fantasy different realm or world setting, and we get a bit of both, and how one kind of bleeds into another is another very fun facet of this series. Joshua Williamson, I've gone on to read more of his work in the pages of DC Comics, for example, but seeing him do this Image series, it just really hits a lot of great chords. I think that this is getting a whole new batch of audience and readers with the release of that deluxe edition recently, but perhaps you're watching this video as a fantasy fan and you're looking for somewhere to jump in, and this might be a book you've never heard of, or maybe you just needed that one additional recommendation to finally take the leap and check it out. I think you could do a lot worse than Birthright. I love the characters. The art is absolutely gorgeous throughout this as well. The pacing is often very solid, and I think that the way the story is constructed just works on all cylinders. Don't miss out on Birthright. Okay, and last but not least for this video, perhaps a bit more of a stretch, but this is another book I'm making my way through, but I think it's worth recommending for a couple reasons. This is Excalibur Omnibus Volume 1 from the pages of Marvel Comics. The reason I recommend this series, and more than any other in our list, I think that this is in some ways most tied to a conventional superhero comic book universe, as it's set in the modern day mainstream Marvel universe. But what we have at a time where the X-Men group is kind of fractured, some members presumed dead, we have Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler and the Phoenix, Rachel Summers, teaming up with some of our British-based Marvel characters like Captain Britain and Megan to form a group of heroes called Excalibur. One part vigilante group, one part X-Men mutant-based team, I would say. Excalibur really sets it apart in that it delves further into the fantasy genre. In fact, one function of Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, is to kind of be a defender of Britain and the other world, which is this fantastical realm. He also has a lot of ties to the multiverse, which leads to a lot of really intricate and interesting storytelling. This book also has a ton of humor, and I think for fans of X-Men around this time, I really enjoyed seeing some of the similarities with Uncanny X-Men and some of the striking differences. With a few notable exceptions like Thor, for example, that we talked about earlier in this video, Marvel doesn't often go full-fledged fantasy, and I think that that is something we actually see within these pages. Written by a lot of industry greats around this time, particularly Chris Claremont, who I always love, this is a really stellar collection here. I was really happy to see when Marvel was releasing these, as I was looking to collect some of the X-Men-based spin-off books. I've also read some of the Captain Britain solo title as well, so this was a fun kind of melding of a couple different worlds. If you enjoy the classic Uncanny X-Men era under Chris Claremont, and you're looking for a dash of fantasy and something a little bit offbeat, Excalibur is squarely where I would point you for a reading recommendation. I thought that this would be a nice way to round out the list as well, because we have some books that go full-fledged fantasy, and then there's something like this that steers closer to a superhero vigilante team group that also dabbles with fantasy. If this sounds interesting, definitely check out Excalibur from Marvel Comics. Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and round out our list of 5 great fantasy comic series. This was a really fun one to put together. I definitely had some superhero picks and a couple non-big two sort of picks, but I hope you enjoyed the list. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of my selections today, or if there's any you could recommend. Are you a fan of fantasy, literature, fiction, or even just as a genre in general? Let me know all that in the comments as well. I thought that this was a fun video. If you'd like to see my take on different subgenres within the comic book medium in a similar video to this, let me know. Maybe throw out some of your favorite genres as well. Can definitely get a video series going if this is popular or if you all want to see it. Thank you so much again for watching, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks everyone. Bye.